Hi guys, it's day 92 of lockdown and it is June the 20th. Apologies in advance, I look an absolute state. We've had a bit of a mad day and then just discovered that we had like a half an hour window in which to film blog before my brother turns up later. So it was either blog now and actually make some sense, or blog later when tiddly. So I just thought, let's do it now, but it does mean no face, and I think I might be wearing what I was wearing yesterday, even though I have been out today.
I am wearing my Welshist t-shirt because we have some Welsh news.
I swear I have washed. I've actually even been out with the dog, but I think I just grabbed whatever clothes to
Had
put
a shower
back on.
and then put her grubby clothes back
on. So yeah, you may be able to tell from the bonkers hair that was left to dry naturally. It is what it is, guys. That's just what's happening. But yeah, so my brother Al is coming over, so we're going to sit in the garden, have a few drinks, and I just thought, actually, we've got some vaguely sort of serious stuff to talk about, so better to get that done
before we're pissed.
And I just call Boris Johnson a cunt over and over again.
Before we're pissed.
We'll
drink a better vlog before we're pissed. Hopefully.
Judging by the singing, maybe not.
Hey.
But yes, so so sorry for a bit dishevelled and if this feels a little rushed, but here we are, it's happening. There were a couple of things that I mentioned very hurriedly at the end of the blog yesterday, so we will go over them in more detail, and actually probably let's start with that and then we'll get to real world life stuff after that, because the real world stuff that's happening, like news-wise, is probably a tad more important than your 4.5 hour expedition to the supermarket.
Was it really as long as?
No, it wasn't 4.5 hours. It was a long time though.
The fact that I believed though.
It was ages.
Oh boy.
But we'll come to that. First of all, I think I basically let's go with what the Welsh government have said for the updated guidelines, because actually, surprisingly enough, since the proposal, but also since a sort of begging people who watch this to let us know who they are and where they're watching us from. There are actually a few people watching this in other countries, bafflingly. A couple of people who were over here and have gone back to the States, my Aussie relatives, and a few other people have sprung up, and so you might not know. So yesterday, what they're doing basically is every 3 weeks they're having a sort of announcement of what's going on with the lockdown measures, usually after having a Cobra meeting, although once or twice Boris Johnson's just not called them, so that the individual devolved governments have just made up their own minds. This one was after a Cobra meeting, but anyway, yes, what's been decided in Wales is still very much, I'd say, on the cautious end of the spectrum compared to, certainly compared to England. But actually, I think quite positive with it. So I'm actually going to need to remind myself what the differences were. From the 6th of July, the big one that actually makes a difference to me is that now the 5-mile restriction on travel will be eased in Wales. The main reason why that's good for me, I won't be going out and about that much anyway. I probably will still be just as much stuck home as I have been. The only difference it makes to me is it does mean I am now able to visit a friend of mine in Swansea. Now, she's been mentioned once or twice before. She has been having a really rough old lockdown, lover. And so I think me and a couple of our sort of Newport friends are going to be able to make the trip, which we haven't been allowed to do until then. So we'll just about miss her birthday. Her birthday's on the 1st, but on the 6th or thereafter, we're all going to go on a bit of a road trip and hopefully perk her up. She's had a terrible time of it, but I won't go into those details. That's for her to tell people and probably not announce. Vlog. Yeah, Joe, start a vlog. But yes, so we'll all be able to go down and visit, which will be lovely. She's got a garden, so it'll still be sitting in gardens, kind of malarkey. We may have to slightly bend the rules and go in to use the loo, because it's probably the best part of an hour and a quarter's drive there and back. I don't see how we're going to avoid being able to use a loo, so sorry, but we'll all hang out in the garden, because that's actually, in England, you are allowed to use people's loos, which, to be honest, I get why they're discouraging it, because they don't want to sort of encourage people into the house, but I think literally if you just sort of don't touch anything, nobody else is in the house, make a beeline for the loo, maybe hand sanitize your hands before you go in, and hand sanitize. Obviously, wash your hands after you use the loo. But I don't need to tell you that. Hopefully,
it's more hygienic than pooing in each other's gardens.
And then just wash your hands when you come out. Should be fine. It's a little bit naughty, but I don't think any police would actually tell you off for it if you were there going, okay, can I pee in your hat then, and just pretend you're pregnant. Also, if you're from another country, that is an archaic rule that apparently still exists, back from when policemen had big tall hats.
Is that still... Have you checked that on Snopes?
I haven't checked. Oh, no, it definitely was a rule. I don't know if it's still in place, but it was still in place, I think, quite recently. It just... Well, there's loads of rules that just haven't been officially repealed. It does not mean that they would hold up in court.
I don't want anyone going out of their way to get pregnant just because they hate the police.
But, well, the law
some sort of
is...
Black Lives Matter protest. I don't understand the motivation.
The law is or was that obviously because there's sometimes urgent needs for pregnant ladies, that if you are caught short, you may ask a policeman, a police officer I should say, and they must let you pee in their hat. Which seems like absolute bullshit, but I'll Snope check it and put it on the blog later. But that's probably, it's better to be using people's loos than doing that. I guess none of us are actually averse to having a little coopy down in the bushes, if needs be. But I don't know how visible to the rest of the world Joe's garden is, but I am not above it, just so you know. But yes, one of the ladies coming with us has a newborn baby, and I dare say she probably has a bladder that means that she might need to use loos more frequently than that, and I think, have at it.
Newborn babies have tiny bladders.
Yeah, not even potty trained yet.
Maybe they put a nappy on the baby and then that'll solve that problem.
I'm thinking just post-pregnancy bladder.
I see. You know?
Particularly quite recent post-pregnancy.
It's almost like I deliberately misunderstood.
Yeah, isn't it? So that's the main difference that makes a difference to my day-to-day life. I still won't be out and about that much. But you know, I think it's nice that certain people I will be able to visit that I haven't been able to, because it's been a long time since I've seen old Joe. I think like last time I saw her was back in March before lockdown, and not immediately before lockdown, and she's been going through it. So it'll be really good to get down there. You'll have an actual day where I'm out of the house for like a whole afternoon, which that hasn't happened during lockdown, really.
I don't know what to do with myself.
Well, actually, I didn't know what to do with myself when you were in the supermarket, and I was starting to worry. Yeah, so the other rule that has been has been eased, is that non-essential shops, as I suspected, were going to be told they could open, can. On Monday. They are allowed to open from Monday, as long as all the appropriate social distancing measures are in place. As far as I could tell, there was some minor waffle, but essentially those were the two things, which I think that's cautious but good. It gives some people, because actually there's some people been giving people a lot of grief in England. Non-essential shops have been allowed to open for a while, and they've been sort of quite bonkers scenes of people queuing for ridiculous lengths to get in places like Primark. Now, personally, I'm not going to be in a massive rush to go to any of the shops particularly, but I'm not going to give gyp to people who are, because not everybody can afford to shop online, and kids will have grown out of clothes since lockdown, unless they happen to have done a good shop just in sort of March. Kids might not have summer clothes that fit them. People who've got little young families, I can imagine, need to get hold of cheap clothes quite quickly, and I'm not going to judge. I don't actually do much shopping on the high street anyway. I will be keen for charity shops to reopen, so I can donate a whole world of stuff. But I probably do about 85% of my clothes shopping in charity shops. But they'll be allowed to reopen. So that's good. I dare say loads of people will have done big sort outs, and charity shops will probably be deluged with people getting rid of stuff. So I'm probably not going to do a donation too quick. I think I'm going to just put loads of stuff in the attic.
Well, also,
but it will be nice to be able to pop in.
It's not just about sort of parents and things with kids growing out of stuff. There's people who, for all sorts of reasons, at the start of lockdown, moved in with friends, partners, family, haven't had access to their own wardrobes. You know, they've been living 12 weeks on the same suitcase,
5 t-shirts and 4 pants. So no judgment there.
No,
really. I think obviously if you are doing it, do it safely. Don't be dickheads about it. We don't need everybody crowding in. But if you're socially distancing, as with all things at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, if you're socially distancing, I'm kind of fine with it.
It's difficult as well because
within reason, obviously.
There are obviously shops that you go, well, that is less essential. But
I guess we do need the economy to be stimulated. If the shops are able to run safely, then it's making people money, which is earning people's wages, which is all good for everyone, really. Like, so if it can be done safely, I think it should be. I'm all for it. But
this is just my opinion, and for what that's worth, which I know is very little. But I guess my personal rule of thumb would be like, well, I wouldn't go into like game. I wouldn't go into town just to pick up a video game.
No.
For example, I mean, I'm not buying video games anyway. I'm still playing Bioshock. I'm fine. But if I was that way inclined, I wouldn't go into town specifically to pick up a game. That seemed like a bit of a pointless journey, and being amongst people more than I have to. But if I'm going into town to buy some clothes and I'm passing game anyway, as long as I keep my distance.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. Like, yeah, that shop might not be essential, but if the people who work in that shop can then start earning some money again, which is great, so they'll be on 100% rather than furlough, because furlough is being wound back. I still don't think the high street will be busy. I think some shops will probably have a massive influx quite early, which for me would be a reason to avoid it, like the plague, funnily enough. But yeah, I think like there will be a bit of a peak and then it will level off. But I think for the most part, people will be sensible. I think particularly in Wales, people have been being pretty sensible. I've been pretty pleased. Like obviously there's, as with all things in life, there's a small element of sort of dickheads who ruin it for everyone else. But like I think for the most part, people are being careful or trying their best anyway.
I think for some people, it's been frustrating how slowly we've kind of eased out of lockdown compared to England and things, and there might be good reasons for that. There might be, some people I'm sure are just like sick of all this and want to go to the pub and whatever. But there are people where their income is affected, or they've been very isolated, or whatever it might be. They haven't been able to
see their loved ones, they've been lonely, and so that's not a little thing. Like for mental health, loneliness is well, it's a killer. It can be. So I'm not to make light of it.
So that sort of frustration is entirely understandable. That said, I think the fact that we've taken this slightly slower approach, Wales has got the lowest rate of secondary infections of anywhere in the UK. That's Northern Ireland, Scotland, and all the various regions of England.
I actually have a little bit of a news pellet on that. That might not. It depends on which set of statistics you're looking at there, because that is based on the data that they're getting from the COVID reporting app, which we use, and they've got enough data for sort of how, because it was well as actually recording if you've got symptoms and if you've got a positive COVID test. That also asks a few behavioural questions, and I think the data it compiles is based on an average sample of X number of people in this area. Who's doing what? Are people out and about? Sorry, there's a dog. I will give you an update on Lucy in a bit, but she is literally underneath us making some noise there, but she's okay. But yeah, there has been a bit of an outbreak up in, I don't know if it's Mid Wales or North Wales, which I think have skewed the statistics slightly. So it depends on where you're looking, but that was a localised outbreak, which will happen. That's going to happen, and I think it was based around a workplace. Everybody in that workplace had to go home and self-isolate. I think it was a chicken factory. So you'd hope that their hygiene practices were up to scratch anyway, but I don't have to worry about that because I don't eat chicken.
But I guess it also proves, okay, so there's an outbreak there. If we'd come out of lockdown more quickly, there'd be more people affected by that, more people having to isolate and so on.
So yeah, there's going to be outbreaks. This isn't going away anytime soon. So there are going to be little outbreaks that pop up here and there. How big those outbreaks are will vary depending on the circumstances, obviously. And essentially, it's going to be a big, long old game of whack-a-mole, which would have been easier to handle if we had an efficient and effective track and trace app by now, but we don't. And actually the track and trace sort of call centre system is working to a degree, but not that effectively, and the app is still non-existent, even though pretty much I think most other countries have got one that is working and is based on not being reliant on you giving the information on who you've been with, but it will basically go, that mobile phone was close to that mobile phone for more than X number of minutes, so these guys need to be alerted that they've been in close contact with someone. So that would actually be perfect for people who, let's say, I had gone on some essential travel on a train to London for whatever reason. I wouldn't have the contact details of the people who were sat near me. This app would. So if we had one that was working, of all of those people who had high risk of being infected would also be told to self-isolate. You're still relying on people doing as they're told, which, as we've seen, has a bit of a degree of so that whether or not people do that. Some people are being very good, some people have been flouting this from the word go. But yeah, the app would have been a big help, and it should have been here by now. Essentially, it was an absolute disaster. Doesn't work, just doesn't work. And they've admitted it's not fit for purpose. This is after they've spent something like £250 million of development on it. Essentially, it's just been a way to siphon off some money. But at least
of Dominic Cummings' mates.
Yeah, but at least if you'd had something to show for it at the end of that, at least like, okay, yeah, it's Machiavellian and Tories being dickheads, but it needed to be made.
But we've got the thing out of it.
We've got one, but the fact that that's happened and we don't even have a working app now, it just shows that nobody in charge at the moment actually gives a shit about the safety of the people.
Given that they spent all that money on an app and then they haven't got an app for show, like if I spent a load of money on something and I didn't get the thing that I paid for,
I'd be cross.
I'd expect a refund.
Yeah.
Can Dominic Cummings' mates give the money back and the government can spend it on like this free school meals or something else?
Tell you what, they could spend it on is they could spend it on student nurses contracts that because they hired them. They could basically begged them. I mentioned this yesterday, but I will go into a little bit more detail. They had been asked to join the front line because they were nearing the end of their studies. It was felt that they could learn on the job, because quite a lot of actually doing a nursing degree is on the job working. You're just also doing academic stuff behind sort of the scenes. So they basically said, we need you. We don't have enough staff. Can we basically give you a 6-month contract to get on the front line, do your COVID stuff. It'll be valuable sort of expertise, and you can finish your degrees later, or it may count towards your degrees because you'll be racking up your hours of placement, basically. They have terminated those contracts early because they managed to keep the outbreak in sort of handleable proportions. But all of those nurses are now in a position where they thought they had 6 months of reliable income. They don't. That's been cut short. They were supposed to go till October. It ends in July. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have the ability to put my hands on sort of several months' pay that I was expecting. And it's not like in the middle of July they can go back to their degrees because the universities are shut.
I don't even know what happens with that. Do they get to restart? Do they have to repeat the year?
I don't know. I would have to speak to somebody actually in academia or a student nurse to find out what they've said, because I think the plan was that that job experience would work towards their degree.
But again,
they can't be awarded their degree while the universities are shut over summer.
And again, if that
so they're not qualified.
Cut short,
yeah,
are they going to?
They haven't got the hours. They might have to continue to do more placement in the autumn, and then maybe graduate around Christmas. It would be my guess, but that is a guess. I'd have to fact check that. But yeah, essentially, it shows how little regard they have for the people who are making this. Like, this is a global emergency. This is a national emergency, and people like student nurses are the reason why we're not. The NHS wasn't overwhelmed. People doing this essentially saved the day. And to treat them this way with such little regard, it's beyond callous, it's cruel, but it's so fucking just I can't even think of the best word for it. It's unbelievable. It's baffling that they have that little, because they just don't care. Even if you don't care and you're a psychopath, surely you should care how it looks. But they don't even care how it looks, which makes me feel like they have an absolute disregard for public opinion. And it feels like a dictatorship. It feels like totalitarian, fascist dictatorship who just going, we can literally do whatever we want because there will be no repercussions. We're in for 4 years, fuck you all. And every single time there's one of these mistakes, fuck ups, or horrible decisions that are very deliberate being made, any one of them should be enough for public outcry.
I've only
Like
just
huge public outcry, and yet people are just going, oh yeah, that's about what I thought. Yep.
you saying that now. I've only just remembered. This was the same government that basically tried to suspend Parliament.
Yeah.
When they were worried they weren't going to get the votes they needed on an issue, they went, oh well.
They wanted to
suspend
speed
Parliament to get a no
through
deal.
the ability to have no deal Brexit.
No
deal, a no deal possibility was eventually ruled out by Parliament by a series of votes, which they didn't want to happen because they wanted to be allowed to do no deal. Essentially, they are still
anyway.
Yeah. Well, they're still in the transitional period. We don't actually have the finalised deal yet. I think they're still dragging their feet to make no deal the default. But they suspended Parliament in order to stop votes happening so that the legislation that was already on the table would pass. It was ruled by the High Court that it was unlawful for them to do that. The thing is...
By which time they'd already done it, though,
They'd done it for a few days. They delayed what they needed to delay. In order to get that to go through, I'm not much of a monarchist. I don't really give a shit. I'm not even an abolitionist. I just don't care. I'm apathetic to the monarchy because as much as I think sort of in terms of what is right or wrong, I don't think any particular family should be born into being sort of any higher privilege than anyone else. Boris, but if you are really monarchistic, Boris lied to the Queen in order to get her to okay
Not
them
the
close.
Queen.
I know, but so if
Guardian of the Swans.
But yeah, it's sort of if you do give a shit about that sort of thing, he did lie to the Queen, closed Parliament so that they could do all these dodgy deals, and then basically when they were caught out on it, there were no repercussions. It was deemed unlawful, but the thing is, unlawful and illegal are two different things. So essentially they said, no, you can't do that because we have laws in place that stop you doing that, so you're going to have to stop doing that. You've got to do the thing that you're supposed to do. But there's no repercussions, and that has taught them a very dodgy lesson, which is we can do whatever we want. And here we are. They are doing whatever they want. And
that seemed like, at the time, I mean, I'd literally forgotten that happened, and I just remembered it now, and it struck me as that, because that at the time seemed like the worst and craziest thing a Prime Minister had done in my lifetime.
But every week from then has just been hold my beer, hasn't it?
Suspending Parliament feels like the sort of thing you should do in like wartime, where it's we have to fight World War II. We can't have a general election right now, or we can't have,
we can't be taking votes on small legislation. We need to have a war cabinet and just get the stuff we need to get done because this is a national emergency.
And they didn't even suspend Parliament for the pandemic. And I'm not saying they should have done, but what I am saying, they shouldn't have done it to force through a no-deal Brexit.
The fact that they had the gall to do it is shocking.
Exactly, it's horrendous. And so...
The nerve of these people.
This is what worries me, though, because, it feels like they've done such terrible things, and they've, their own government scientists admitted so many more people have died because of their failure to act. Oh, God,
that's another thing I need to mention.
And yet there's this sort of feeling in the pit of my stomach of, oh God, they'll put off the general election for as long as possible, and they'll try and convince the nation, oh, we got you through that difficult time, and people will just forget, like I forgot about the suspension of Parliament. It's just, because things are moving so fast and so many things are happening.
The only thing I can hope is enough people will have enough really horrible real world consequences that they can't really blame anyone other than the government, that enough people will remember that at the very least it won't be such a fucking landslide. But the other thing, this is a story that I need to mention, and then we'll just cover an update on Lucy and your mad shop expedition. But yeah, last night, I think it came out yesterday, I read it quite late last night, story came out in The Guardian. Now, what they've done is they've done a detailed analysis on the data of COVID deaths. They've only looked at April's data for this, because obviously there's lots of sort of delays and things, and so they've collated it all together, and they've checked, because back in April, when we were sort of at the peak, they weren't saying in the daily briefings deaths in other settings. They were only saying COVID deaths in hospitals. it seems like they've done a very dodgy deal to sort of cook the books by anyone who they didn't think was going to make it in hospital was getting discharged into care homes. Care homes were having massive epidemics. It was spreading through care homes. The number of deaths in care homes was shocking. I think it accounts for about 40% of the total COVID deaths. And those figures weren't in the daily briefings. Now that we're in the lower end and we're sort of in more manageable numbers, now they're saying those numbers, but they haven't retroactively gone back and changed the data for the previous. The Guardian have, so they've done a sort of investigative piece looking into all the data. Our highest rate, the highest daily death rate of any of this that was announced in the daily COVID meetings was 900. I think it was 958. It was in the 900s. Turns out, for 22 days straight, the deaths of COVID with a positive COVID test were over 1,000. Over 1,000 people dying every day for 22 days straight, and they didn't once say that it had even gone over into the 4 digits. Not once. They cooked the books, they have lied, and they knew what they were doing. That is deliberately misleading the people on how bad this is by actively making choices that mean more people died. At its worst, it was over 1,500 in one day, which was actually, I think, the 8th of April, which they thought that the peak was on the 10th. Well, that was actually a few days earlier, but because they weren't counting deaths in nursing homes, regardless of whether or not they had a positive COVID test, and also you've got to bear in mind, once COVID got into a nursing home from someone with a positive COVID test, several people in that nursing home will have died without a positive COVID test, but they will still have died, and you know it's of COVID. But they won't necessarily have had a test because they were only testing people in hospitals. They've cooked the books to deliberately mislead the public. They're denying that they've done that, of course. They're saying we've always been 100% transparent about what the data we were announcing was. And they were saying hospital deaths of COVID. But when you're just seeing the headline and you're just seeing the number and you're just looking at the daily numbers, you're not going, oh, how many people have died today in hospital of COVID? You're saying how many people died today of COVID. And they knew what they were doing, and they were deliberately misleading us in order to downplay the seriousness of the epidemic, of the pandemic. And it's unforgivable. And it's like that in itself. When I read it, sorry, that was Lucy. I immediately forwarded it to you, and I was just like, holy shit, have you seen this? I knew the death rate was so much higher, but 22 days straight of over 1,000 people a day. People don't die 1,000 a day of anything. Like, that's mental. And you, I think, like, you were reading some really shitty wrestling news at the time, and you were like, I don't know if you're just like, have got like shock fatigue, but you're just like, I'm not even surprised anymore at the bullshit these guys are pulling. But we should all be in absolute, like, apoplectic with rage. This is appalling. But the fact that they've downplayed the epidemic, the fact that they've been vague about the messaging, basically means more people have died because of the way this has been handled. Like, and there's still people thinking, oh, they've done their best. No, they haven't. They, as far as I can see, you can't look at this as any other way than either they don't care or they're deliberately doing it. But I look at it and going, they got handed basically a golden ticket because they were like, oh, this is an illness that won't, for the most part, affect the fit, well, healthy people who make the money in the economy, but it's going to make massive savings on our welfare budget. If we actually deliberately send it into all those care homes, we're going to kill off a bunch of people who are just sponging off the state for money and resources, forgetting that these are actual people who have families, who've paid their taxes all their life. They're usually the elderly. They're not entirely, because some of these care homes are for people with other health difficulties who might be young people. But for the most part, you're going to be looking at elderly people. Those elderly people have paid taxes all their life. They've done their bit, and now is the time we should be looking after them. But they've just gone, fuck them, kill them, literally. Kill them. And then they've got the gall to say in their daily briefings that we put a protective ring around nursing homes. No, you didn't. You actively had a policy, and this has been proven, you actively had a policy to discharge non-promising patients into care homes. regardless of whether or not they'd been tested, regardless of whether or not they were infectious. Also bearing in mind quite a lot of those staff in those care homes did not have adequate PPE, and there have been subsequent deaths of young, fit, healthy people as well. Not that they're any worse or better, but it's just an interesting point to note. I'm absolutely disgusted and appalled. And I forgot about that story. This is how bad the news is at the moment. Like, terrible things are happening several times a day that you can forget a story like that.
And they start to wash over you. It's incredible. And you mentioned there that I was reading some shitty wrestling news. To clarify, that is shitty news about wrestling, not news about shitty wrestling.
Sorry, yes.
But,
oh yeah, sorry, that wasn't me just being really mean about your one of your principal hobbies.
Messing,
you were looking at your shitty wrestling again.
I mean, more stuff has been going on. It's just all kind of hashtag speak out, which is kind of an equivalent of hashtag me too. And there's been some more names come to light. Twitter,
I suspect that will get a lot bigger before it subsides.
Yeah, I suspect. Kind of terrified. And the thing is, there's not been any kind of big names come out. But then you go, well, is that because those guys are all innocent as stuff, or is it because people are more afraid to kind of name and shame them? So it's all. I
imagine what will probably be going on, if the Me Too movement is anything to go by, is when the first stories hit about some people within the industry, other people who have been affected will at this stage just be having conversations with each other and deciding there's safety in numbers, that we know, because it is probably known. Victims of this will probably have seen it happening to other people and will probably have confided in each other, and previously it's not been safe or it's not felt wise to come forward, and now it's like, oh well, stories are coming out anyway, maybe now is the time to actually I'll admit it if you admit it, and we'll all sort of work together. And then you get those stories that come out, like sort of when all of those people came out against Bill Cosby.
What has happened in sort of other industries is oftentimes, not always, but you hear someone comes out and it's a surprise to us, but people within the industry insiders, like, oh yeah, there were rumours and people knew, and kind of so who knows what names could come out with wrestling. There's a couple of names come out, including a couple of a few people who've worked for NXT UK. There's one guy from NXT in the US who's been released.
With charges or released without charge?
Released from WWE, the company.
Oh, right, sorry. I thought you meant he'd been arrested.
No, as far as I know, there haven't been any arrests yet, although police are said to be looking into some stuff over in this country. Right. But this is spreading over to the US as well now. So one guy's been released from the company. Another guy with similar accusations has not been released, but I don't know if that's because, he's been able to provide some evidence, or if it's because of the different ways the wrestlers have responded or handled it, or the different, whether it seems plausible, or if it's because one guy's seemed more important to the company,
won't be getting the full story.
Do you know what I mean? And so it's really, it's very troubling.
Well, there will still be people looking after each other. People in power will still be going, okay, well, maybe that one can be the sacrificial lamb so that I can save my other buddies.
I'm not sort of naming any names.
No, I think that's wise.
More is kind of known,
but you can find out yourself if you are interested.
That's not the same as defending or trying to protect anyone.
No, I think
it's important to believe the victims.
I agree, but I think when it's so fresh and there are conflicting stories, you can add to the noise, or you can wait and find out what the story is.
One of the problems with all this is the major source of it all is Twitter, and I can understand why Twitter is a useful medium to kind of get stuff out there and have hashtags and have things spread.
You can't go into the detail very well, though, can you?
Well, no, but also it's very difficult if you want to research a story and you search, for example, a wrestler's name online. Yeah. And all you get is just people commenting and saying this, and it's hard to find the original source material or what's actually what the accusations are. You're just getting people say, "Oh, I believe this." Well, I don't believe it.
It's kind of like you kind of need to have like somebody sort of summarising it and making a timeline of it and
kind of collate and
time has gone on, and actually Alan will probably be turning up shortly, so we better sort of get closer to sort of slightly more sort
Yes.
of more mundane
We're
stories.
running
But
out of time, but there's a couple of things. First, should we do an update on Lucy now,
yes,
first of all?
Lucy, bless her, is still not very well. I haven't had to be on with her for the vets, but she has had another quite long, prolonged panting fit today. It is that she's got a bad belly. I have been able to tell by external symptoms, shall we say, and she's been put on bland food, so she's had a bit of rice and scrambled egg in small portions throughout the day today. I'm hoping it's subsiding. She seems better after I had to take her out because she would not, like, we haven't got grass in the garden, and she doesn't like, bless her, she doesn't like to use the patio, but I think especially because her belly's not well, she wants grass, so I took her out for a walk. Crikey, was not pleasant. But after that she seemed a lot better, and because I could not get her to settle. I went for a quick shower because we were planning on like doing a quick vlog before you went shopping. When I was in the shower, she pushed the bathroom door open and came in and was just going I was like, hello, you. So then I ended up having to just sort of sit in my towel on the bathroom floor, just trying to calm her down for ages.
And
she's trying to like get in by you, and it's just like, obviously she's in, but she'd been so good, like all night she'd been still. She'd got up, she'd eaten her small bit of breakfast quite keenly, like she was a bit like, what the hell is this? Because Lucy is a Labrador, and if you've ever had Labradors, you know that they will eat anything, but even she sort of went, this doesn't look or smell right, but it's food. But yeah, she ate that relatively happily and then just slept for a fair few hours while I was still in bed.
Woke us up this morning whining, didn't we?
Yeah, and I was a bit worried that she wasn't well.
And then I got up and it turned out she was whining because she wanted to get on the bed in the spare room. But at one end of that bed was a tiny cat propped up against the pillow.
Bless her.
And she wasn't brave enough
to get up.
She's so submissive. Yeah.
She's so submissive. If one of the cats is on the bed, she needs permission from us to get on the bed, although she doesn't, and the cats don't care.
Yeah, it's not like Ford was going to be a dick about it.
He was asleep. You probably wouldn't have noticed. But also, if one of the cats is just sitting on the stairs, she can't move up or down the stairs. She's just stands at the bottom going... just like, oh bless you, you're so sweet. But yeah, she's not a very forceful character. But yeah, so she was panting for a long time, and so then we were supposed to go shopping. I decided I couldn't leave her, so you subsequently did go without me.
Yes.
Forever. I think I did take her out, and then when she got back from her walk, she was still at it for a bit, but probably about 45 minutes or so after she got in, she finally lay down on the ground, and you could see like her breathing was still fast, but she wasn't panting, and she's settled. She's still a bit excitable. I think she's just uncomfortable, and I think it's making her a bit scared and a bit stressed. So I think the panting is actually more distress because she's uncomfortable than anything else. So I'm hoping a few days of the bland diet will clear out whatever's going on, and hopefully she'll perk right back up. But thankfully the Joy app is there. We can use that to have video consults with vets. It's brilliant. I have checked because I mentioned it before, because they were a godsend when we had Poppet with her broken leg. She was so stressed, and she hates the cat carrier, and she hates travelling in the car anyway. It's awful because, like, have you ever seen a cat pant? It's a real stress signal, and Poppet would be eyes wide panting, and you could tell she's just awful and obviously in pain. So I would try, if I could, to avoid taking her to the vets unnecessarily, but there were a few things we were like, I'm not sure if this is okay, she's acting a bit odd.
Use some advice.
I could use some advice, and then the vets, basically, they video chat with you, and then they talk you through the things that they need you to look at, and then they sort of go, yeah, like, oh, can you, and actually, both with Poppet and with Lucy, they're really thorough, and they really do put your mind at ease, give you a sort of a plan of action. They can prescribe medication if it's needed, and have it posted out to you. Obviously, as with vets, there would be a charge for that because you pay for the medication. But also another thing that they do, because we get that free with Animal Friends Insurance anyway, which I think they've worked out reduces vets' bills, so it's kind of win-win for them. But you can pay per use. I think it's like 20 quid for a consultation, but it might save you a trip to the vet. But if you have a video consultation, if you do all of their like symptom checklist and then it goes, no, you probably do need to have a video consultation, you have the video consultation and they still say, unfortunately, this is something I can't do by video, you are going to have to take them to the vet, they don't charge you. So that is kind of, it's worth it. I'd say download it if you've got animals. It might save you unnecessary trips to the vet. If you've got Animal Friends Insurance, use that anyway. I would say because I didn't know that it was included, and thankfully they did like a little random sort of email out, and it was just a couple of days before Poppet broke her leg, and I remembered I was like, oh, because actually the night that she broke her leg, I didn't really want to handle her because she was in so much pain. It was the middle of the night. I was like, is this something that I can let her calm down and then take her to the vets in the morning? Or is this like I need to get her to a vet now because she was, oh God, it was awful. So actually they put my mind at rest that evening that it was like, you can call us back at any time. They looked at her, they were like, right, okay, I think she's probably broken a bone or two, but her breathing is stable, her eyes are responsive. If she stays alert, then for now it is probably better to let her sort of calm down and then take her to the vets in the morning, which is what we did. But yeah, it was an absolute godsend. So I would highly recommend that. Look into it if you've got animals. There's a cat, in case you're wondering why he's zoned out.
But yeah, so Lucy was ill.
Lucy was ill.
So you couldn't come to the shops.
Nope.
I had to go to the shops on my own. Well, I got a lift. But I'd go
Poor old Lift decided to wait in the car park for you. We should have advised him differently to that, shouldn't we?
Yeah. I mean, it was... we haven't been to a big supermarket I went once to do the click and collect, but I just stood by the customer service desk while they found my groceries.
Yeah,
and that was it. So
I haven't
been
been in a
big supermarket since all this began. I'm sure some of you have still been going regularly because that's where you go for your essential shop, and this is all very mundane to you.
Yeah, we've done it all by deliveries or click and collect.
There might be other people who are screening or haven't even been to a little shop.
Yeah.
But it was there was a bit of a queue at the till, which was a bit weird because then you kind of feel a bit like rushed to get everything out of your trolley and onto the belt when you're actually called forward.
And you were doing a bagel shop.
Yeah, it was a whole big trolley full. Excuse me. And then there was a massive queue outside the supermarket to get in, but it was moving quite quickly. It's a Saturday.
I was wondering about that because I was like, oh, it's a Saturday. The reason we wanted to do it earlier was so that we could come back and have some drinks in the garden. But obviously that does mean it's a Saturday, it's a supermarket, it's busy.
But it wasn't as busy as it probably normally would have been on a Saturday. And the queue was moving
felt like it because of the long queue.
The queue was all the way around the car park. It seemed ludicrous, but it actually moved fairly quickly, quicker than it sometimes has at the little Tesco up the road. Once I got in there, I was quite surprised there weren't floor markings.
Oh right,
or anything about distance or a one-way system
just
or anything like that.
Just had to kind of be like, right, behave yourselves.
Yeah, but that said, like it's a massive supermarket.
The aisles in that one are really wide aisles because actually the thing in the local one you struggle because I guess that's why you have to have a one-way system is because you can't afford to have people passing in the aisles because they're so narrow. But actually that's a big supermarket.
It's a big cavernous thing, and although it was a Saturday, so it's probably busier than it would be in the week. Still not as busy probably as it would be normally on a Saturday outside of lockdown. So actually.
But why were you so long?
I
joked about it being about 4.5 hours. It was probably pushing 3 hours.
I had to find all your vegan nonsense, didn't I?
Well, I find all your meaty nonsense when I go.
Do you? What meaty nonsense do you find? When was the last time you went to the supermarket and got all my meaty nonsense?
Well, obviously not during lockdown at all, but I have done big shops in supermarkets.
All the meat is basically in one place. It's very convenient. All the vegan stuff is squirreled away in secret sections. Some of it is mixed in with the regular stuff. Some of it's got its own sections. And, it's a nightmare. And
it is a nightmare, isn't it? So maybe they should just have better vegan sections. Well, it's just the thing is, because you've got some vegan stuff that's refrigerated, some vegan stuff that's freezer, and some vegan stuff gets lumped in with the just general free from section. It's like, is this here because it's like gluten free, or is this here because it's vegan? You still have to check everything. But also just because, I was there with my mask, and like I said, on the one hand, it did feel a bit like a normal shop. But you did have to be a bit self-aware of where you were going and things, and I didn't feel like you could kind of dash and find a member of staff and ask them and drag them about the aisles as well. So if I couldn't find something, you're blaming me entirely.
No, I'm not blaming you entirely. I'm saying there were other things that I couldn't ask about stuff that I wanted for myself as well. Like I was going to get paprika. I couldn't find paprika. I still haven't got paprika.
I'm pretty sure we've got paprika.
Not the sort of paprika I wanted. And so
how many sorts are there?
It was.
I think we've only got smoked actually.
Well, exactly. Well, anyway, that's another thing. But having said it felt relatively normal But it's just the first time I've been somewhere like that for a long time, and just
Yeah.
kind of navigating everything, remembering. Oh no, I was meant to get that, so now I've got to double back.
Yeah.
Where do they keep things? What?
Yeah, you
weighing
don't
up the
actually
options.
know that
And doing
supermarket
a
either,
big
do you?
supermarket shop all on your own. Like if you'd been there, it wouldn't have just been a bit quicker. I think it would like been about a third of the time to do it with another person rather than just.
Sorry, I was just checking that wasn't Alan.
Not sort of speed. I'm quite slow and methodical in my doing of things anyway, as a general rule. I'm not one of life's
Rushes.
no. So, but yeah, so I did feel a bit bad for Al. He had to go and get a McDonald's.
I felt very bad for Al. I was starting to be like, has something happened? So I was just like, I don't want to, because I didn't want to stress you out by being like, is everything okay? But I was just like, I could sense that like, because also men just don't like. Ali was sitting in the car park and didn't think, I'll text Chris and see if it's okay for me to go for McDonald's. Waited for me to text him to see if everything was okay. And he's like, can you check if it's okay? It's like, text each other, guys. You've got each other's numbers. And then Chris, I was like, have you spoken to Al at all? He's like, no. And I'm like,
well, I've been busy shopping.
Well, I know, but I think once time sort of was getting on, I think I'd probably be like, oh, well, actually, I'm going to take longer than I thought.
I didn't know how long I thought I was going to take. I was just getting the shopping. There's a lot of shopping to get, guys.
Right, but we had better draw that to a close, actually, because actually Alan, bless him, we need to reward him with some beers, and he'll probably be here any second.
Yes,
but yeah, quite a long blog today. Sorry, quite a lot of stuff.
I was going to say, Al, if you're watching this, we're chilling some beers for you, but this goes out tomorrow morning on YouTube, and Al's literally on his way over now.
Yeah.
So we can just tell him about the beers when he gets here.
I think we could. I think we should do that.
There you go, sorted.
Sorted.
That one, didn't I?
Oh, you're a genius.
Yeah.
Right, okay, guys.
Like and subscribe,
we will
guys.
see you tomorrow.
There's no shame in it.
No shame in it.